Sensor dust. That's still a problem, even in the age of automated self-cleaning sensors. And it rears its ugly head when you least expect it, or when you've forgotten to make sure that your sensor is clean before you start shooting. I think Panasonic, one of the a valid criticism, and I've seen this from people online, is that its self-cleaning sensor is not quite up to the level of other manufacturers. And in my experience, this is actually the case. Now, when I shot Canon, the first 5D, what they call the Classic, which I've never quite got that, but the original 5D sensor on that camera was a dust magnet, and it did not have sensor cleaning. And so you really had to pay attention, and you had to look at your images very closely. If you had sky in the image, it was really easy to see dust spots. And then when they added sensor cleaning to the 5D Mark II, that problem was greatly reduced. Now, one thing I will say in Panasonic's favor is that the filter stack in front of the sensor, the glass, the cover glass and the IR and UV filters, that is pretty thick on Panasonic cameras. So in everyday use at normal apertures, frequently you can have dust and you don't see it, or you barely see it. The problem is when you stop the lens down. So say if you're shooting at f5.6 or f8 and you stop your lens down to f16, which it's not frequent that you would do that, you will definitely see the sensor. By the way, if you go from f5.6 to f8 to f11, that's stopping down, not going up. Remember, that number's a ratio. There's a 1 over it. At any rate, but where that could be a problem on a Panasonic camera is if you're taking photos and then you want to take a quick video and you use the quick video button. That is going to try to get the shutter speed to 1/60th of a second for video. And since when you do that, you're in a program mode, it's going to shut the lens down on a bright day to f11 or f13 or f16. And you're going to see that in your video. And, you know, it's a lot harder to get rid of dust spots in a video than it is in a still photo. What do you do about this? Well, it's my recent experience, as you saw in that intro video of the Canada geese. You gotta make sure before you go out and shoot that your sensor's clean. And there are things that you can do to do that. One is, really, when you get to your location, run that sensor cleaning system on your camera. And on Panasonic cameras, if you go to the wrench icon in your menu, it's actually on the last page. Let's see, will this work? Yes, it will. So using that, running that before you start shooting is a good idea. However, it's a good idea to check the camera before you go out. And how do you do that? Well, because when you stop it down to say f16, you can really see sensor dust. You can set the camera to either aperture priority or manual and stop down. And I prefer doing it in aperture priority and letting the shutter speed adjust itself. But stop it down to say even f22 and turn the autofocus to manual, or the focus to manual rather than autofocus, because it doesn't need, the lens does not need to be in focus to do this. And then just point it at a blank surface, like your ceiling, and take a picture. And then when you do that and look at that picture, you can zoom in, and if there's dust, now I just cleaned this sensor, but I will put up pictures of what it looks like if you have sensor dust. There's a little bit of a smudge. It's probably nothing big, but I don't know, we'll see if this works. Can you see that? Now you see over on the right side there is a little smudge there. As a matter of fact, if I move this a little bit, you'll see that it moved. So there's a little smudge there. That's not bad. Sometimes you see some pretty horrendous stuff. But if you see that, what do? Easiest thing to do is hopefully that's not suck. Well, if you see that, run the sensor cleaning and do that same test again and look to see if you can see it. But if you do see it, rocket blower or some sort of blower, blow it off. And then run that same test again. If it's still there, you're probably going to have to do a physical cleaning with something like this sensor clear. Now these things have it's like a lens pen. These things have a brush. This brush is not for brushing off the sensor. This is actually for brushing off the area of the lens mount. So when you tilt the camera, nothing falls back on the sensor. And then this little pad, you're going to reach in and clean that sensor. Now, if you're not comfortable doing this, don't do it. Take the camera to a bricks and mortar camera store. They'll do it for a charge, or you're going to have to send the camera in to get that done. The other thing is with these IBIS sensors, internal in-body image stabilization sensors, they float. So when you clean the sensor is going to move around. I've been doing this a long time, so I don't have any issues with using these things to clean off a sensor. But that's essentially what you want to do. Another really important thing, when you get a new camera, do this test, because the very first Lumix camera I bought, the very first GX85 I bought, actually had a little piece of grit, and it was embedded somewhere in front of the sensor. In the filter stack or in the glass, there was this thing there. I tried cleaning it off, wouldn't come off. Took it back to where I bought the camera. I happened to have bought the camera from a bricks and mortar camera store and showed it to them, and they tried to clean it off. Wouldn't come off. So it was actually embedded in somewhere in front of the sensor. And they replaced the camera without question, but I think it's a really good idea to check things like this. And again, you're not going to see this in a lot of photos. If it's not in the sky, if it's down in foliage or in details in the photograph, it's going to be hard to see this. But always check it. If you're outside, rather than using a ceiling, a blank sky is perfect, whether it be a blank gray sky or a blank blue sky. If you stop the lens down to f16 and take that picture, you should see that sensor dust. But what do? What if you've already taken a picture, say it's geese, in a clear blue sky, and you need to make sure there's no dust on it, even faintly, if you didn't stop way down, especially if you're going to submit to a stock agency, because if they find it, you're going to get bounced. If you happen to submit to Alamy and you submit 25 images and they find one with a problem like that, they all fail, because they don't look at every image. They just check a few. Here's the trick to finding dust that you might miss otherwise. In Lightroom, or whatever software you're using, hopefully has something akin to the Dehaze slider in Lightroom. Slide that Dehaze slider all the way to the right. The image is going to look horrendous, but any sensor dust is going to pop out at you, so you'll see that. And then just double click on the word Dehaze in Lightroom to get it back to normal. And of course, you're going to use your spot repair tool in Lightroom to get rid of that dust. So there's a few things to think about when you're shooting, and don't assume that because your camera does automatic cleaning that you're not going to have dust on your sensor. That's it for today. Hopefully that was helpful to you. If it was, please hit that like button. If you've recently subscribed, or subscribed even not recently, I really appreciate it. That is a big help to me. And I'm Todd Banner. I will see you next time.